Well, North Korea rockets hitting the U.S. mainland, as you heard, is, quote, inevitable. So claimed Kim Jong-un's foreign minister at the United Nations earlier today. As those words have escalated, Ri Yong-ho taking the podium to answer President Trump. You know, he didn't bang his shoe like Khrushchev or have his gun in his holster like Yasser Arafat did at the podium. But he harshly attacked our commander-in-chief and our country for the president having used the General Assembly podium to call Kim Rocket Man and threaten to destroy North Korea if it attacks the U.S. or our allies.
None other than Trump himself is on a suicide mission. In case innocent lives of the U.S. are harmed because of this suicide attack, Trump will be held totally responsible.
So what can we take from Ri's response? Jonathan Wachtel is with us, former spokesperson for Ambassador Nikki Haley, former director of communications there at the U.S. mission to the UN, also the former Fox News United Nations bureau chief and producer. Jonathan, the foreign minister wouldn't even call President Trump by his name, even said someone called the president. He said the president used reckless and violent words. Is this more bluster, or is it really a preview of their planned strategy and what we can expect?
It's become deeply, deeply personal now for them. The rhetoric has been increasing. It's not stopping. We're seeing actions that they're doing that are showing that they want anything but defiance. They had an opportunity today to try to have a more conciliatory tone if they really wanted to do it. Obviously, the foreign minister decided not to do that. He went to the podium and started punching right away. So, you know, this is what they want.
And it was the opposite. What does that mean playing out in terms of their type of actions? Obviously, they will probably test another bomb. They may even have another missile test soon.
They're doing everything they can to show strength. That's what their campaign is. That's what they're going to do. And any sign of weakness they feel is a sign of vulnerability. So they're going to do everything they can to try to instill fear. They think that they're instilling fear within the American populace by doing this. I mean, we all as Americans know how we feel about this, and there is a level of anxiety that we feel because, let's face it, nuclear weapons are not, you know, they're a very dangerous thing indeed. But having said that, this has become really personal. And the scary thing about that is that it's one thing that President Trump represents the American people. He's a president who was brought into power by election. Kim Jong-un is a man who inherited power from his dictator father, and before that, the dictator before that. This is the King dynasty. They answer to themselves. They don't even answer to their people. In fact, they oppress their own people and have used their people, the backs of their own people, and stealing from them and ensuring that they don't have the wherewithal to have normal lives to build this nuclear program that they have. So this deeply personal stuff is a little terrifying in that you could see some sort of miscalculation, which we obviously need to avoid at all costs.
And they see the attacks against Kim as an attack against the state because they equalize Kim with the state. Here's what else the foreign minister said. Let's get a taste.
The absurd reality that a person like Trump, a mentally deranged person full of megalomania and complacence, the person who is chastised even by American people as commander-in-chief, Lion King, President Evil, is holding the seat of the U.S. president, and the dangerous reality that the gambler who grew old using threats, frauds, and all other schemes to acquire a patch of land holds the nuclear button. These are what constitute the gravest threat to the international peace and security today.
Well, when he uses terms like mentally deranged, I mean, how does the U.S. answer back?
Look, you can decide to engage with that type of rhetoric, or you can just let it sit. So this is the decision that our president has to take. Is he going to play this game of back and forth, yelling at each other and calling each other terrible names and cursing each other and telling each other that you're on suicide missions? What are we going to do? What are we going to do as a nation? Is this going to, you know, this has obviously gone too far already. It really has gone too far. So how far is it going to go beyond too far before this turns into something that neither of us want?
You know, we're focusing on the name and the name calling, and the over-the-top rhetoric that they use, that he used in that speech today. But also there were some glimpses of their strategy in that he said he wanted to have a balance of power with the U.S., that the nuclear weapons are defensive, and he totally said that the international community does not have any legal international standing. He's referring to the 9 UN resolutions. Let's listen to what he said about that.
in the United Nations, unjustifiable resolutions which illegalize justice as injustice are randomly adopted due to the high-handedness of the U.S.
So he rejects the legitimacy of the Security Council.
He not only rejects the legitimacy of the Security Council, he essentially said to his friends out there, because he does have friends, he named them in the speech. He said, thank you, Syria, thank you, Iran, thank you, Venezuela, and thank you, Cuba. Let's face it, these are not friendly nations to the United States, but they are supporting him within the United Nations. So if there's any utility that he sees in the United Nations, it's from this small group, the very same group that President Trump mentioned in his speech, of this rogue group of countries that are creating all the havoc in the world. He adores those countries. Those are his support.
And it's interesting when he talks about the Security Council, he obviously is lumping China into that. Is that very significant that we heard actually hostile words from Ri basically about China, even if he didn't mention Beijing by name?
It is significant. Eric, when we used to cover the United Nations years ago, we used to see that China was constantly propping up the regime, never voting against it, always very careful about
until 2006, first time.
Absolutely. So we're in new territory, and obviously that has irked Kim Jong-un to a level that wasn't there before. So he's obviously quite angered by what Beijing is doing, and it is isolating to have this happen. Now, we have to be honest here. The new sanctions, which are strong, they haven't had a chance to really kick in yet. It's going to take time to see if they actually do kick in. It's going to take time to see whether China and Russia and other countries follow through with these sanctions and actually tighten the screws on Pyongyang. We have a lot to see play out here.
And this is all being played out as they throw the insults back and forth. Meanwhile, China saying it will stop a lot of the oil, cut off the financial trading with their banks. We'll see if they actually follow through with that. Jonathan Wachtel, with whom I covered the United Nations for many years, and you went off into government service. Thank you for this service to our country, and thank you for your analysis and insight today.
Pleasure being with you.
As always.